Good day. Today we will be discussing the 8th chapter of the art of rhetoric. This chapter is very short, spanning only 2 pages. In this chapter, Aristotle rounds out his discussion of political or deliberative rhetoric with an explanation of what he deems to be the most important factor to consider before making your argument and setting out your claims or your proposals towards the audience in a political setting. Aristotle says that it is essential to understand the culture, the institutions, the form of government, and the interests of the audience at hand. And he defines government in 4 ways. Those ways are democracy, rule by lot; oligarchy, where the rulership is defined by the ownership of property; monarchy, which is rulership defined by a supreme right to judge over the rest by a single individual; and aristocracy, which taken literally means the rule by the best, but practically this involves the rule by those who are qualified, almost educated, under the system of the prevailing law. He also defines the ends of the various forms of government. And unlike Plato, the inference is that democracy is the best form of government from Aristotle. The end of democracy to Aristotle is freedom. Oligarchy is wealth, but the wealth of the oligarchs. Of course, aristocracy, the maintenance of education and institutions, and tyranny is just a self-preservation of the tyrant. Why do I say that Aristotle insinuates democracy as a superior form of government for the attainment of human happiness? I say that because earlier in the book, Aristotle defines happiness as the ultimate goal, and he defines happiness as a combination of prosperity and independence, independence being a form of freedom. Therefore, it stands to reason that democracy, to the extent that it promotes freedom, is the form of government that promotes happiness and therefore promotes the ultimate objective. Aristotle moves from defining the forms of government to speaking about how we should use those. When you address an audience, Aristotle says that you need to consider the moral character of the form of governing, and you need to appeal to that moral character when addressing that audience. You determine the moral character by observing the deliberate choices or the deliberate acts of choice of the individuals within that government, or the individuals that represent the government. This is interesting because it contrasts with the purported theoretical or ideal end of the 4 forms of government earlier in the chapter. Earlier in the chapter he said democracy was to do with freedom, oligarchy, wealth, and so forth, but now he's saying actually you should tell a government by its fruit. You should be looking at what the representatives of that government are doing, and you should make an inference based on what they're doing, what their governing principles are. Always work backwards from their governing principles when making your argument. So it's just a matter of savoir-faire. You need to know who you're addressing, what their way of life is, and take that into account. It's almost like common sense. So that concludes chapter 8, which is a very short chapter. Chapter 9 considers virtue and vice and the concept of the noble, and we'll hopefully have a video on that shortly. Thank you.